I'm here with Dr. Umar Nasser, junior doctor and founder of Rational Religion, a platform of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community that argues for the existence of God. He is also a commentator for various news outlets on religion, science and society. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, going straight to the first question, brain scans have shown increased activity in certain areas of the brain associated with religious practices such as praying, and suggesting we are hardwired to believe in God. However, atheists and believers alike argue that this supports their stance, meaning evolution versus divinely created. What would you say in response to opposing views differently interpreting the same results?
So this is a whole sort of area, I think it's generally called cognitive science of religion, which is basically about the neuroscience of religious practices and also the developmental theories of how we detect agency, so how we detect that there is some person or something, or some kind of agent behind the things that we see in front of us. And they found various things. They found that, you have certain patterns of brain activity associated with meditation or prayer or this kind of thing. Now, to me, that doesn't really argue strongly either for or against religion. I mean, it's completely obvious that you're going to have certain types of brain activity associated with your mental activity, and that if your mental activity is praying or doing some kind of religious practice, it will necessarily change your brain state in a certain way. Maybe it'll make you feel better in a certain way. Maybe it'll give you a certain type of release. Whatever it is, it's going to make you feel that way. That in itself does not necessarily argue either for or against the existence of God. Now, one thing which is discussed in this context is that they say that when you're growing up, you have what they call a hypersensitive agency detection device, which is basically, as I mentioned, it's a way of thinking, if you will, that children develop, and we get it as we grow older, of detecting agents. So what they say is at first you're too sensitive. You think that there's an agent behind everything, behind every gust of wind, behind every type of movement. You think maybe there's some kind of spirit moving that, and eventually you start to whittle down your responses, and then you start to see, okay, there's a person there, but actually there's more of a natural process there. And as you grow a little bit older, sort of past your toddler years, they find that actually children tend to believe in God, something like God, some kind of super agent which is controlling the world. So this is a certain theory, and they say on the basis of this, atheists rather do. Atheists say on the basis of this that what's happening is that religious people have they've got an overactive, hypersensitive agency detection device, i.e. they're looking out for agency, for agent too much, and that's where they're going wrong. It's just a cognitive bias that they're actually looking into nature too much, and they're seeing an agent behind it. In the same way that if you look at the clouds, sometimes you might see a face, and they say, well, that's what we're doing, but religious people are too hyperactive in this. And they are over-extrapolating and thinking, oh, there's a God behind everything. I don't think that's really an argument for anything, but I think it's a really bad argument, because I could equally say that the agency detection device of the atheist is deficient. And actually they've got a problem where they're not able to see that there's clearly an agent behind nature itself. So the argument goes both ways, and it's not really it's not very well thought through in my opinion. When we're looking for agency, i.e. some kind of agent behind nature, behind anything, what we do is we look for two things. We look for complexity and we see purpose. So when you see a cloud in the which kind of looks like a face for a second or two, you can think, well, that's not at that high level of complexity. It's not particularly, it's very transient. You can understand that it doesn't take that many different clouds to be put together in a certain way, and from a certain perspective, look like a face. And you can say, well, that's likely to be chance. But if you also see happy birthday Umar written in clouds, in vapor across the sky, then at that point I would think that actually I think there's an agent behind that, because the complexity of that is far greater than me seeing a cloud transiently in the sky. And also it has a purpose. It's my birthday. So someone I know has rented a plane and has put my name in the sky. So I would assume there that there's an agent behind that, and that would be a valid inference. So it's not about whether your agency detection devices is, too deficient or too hyperactive. It's simply a question of whether the inferences of religious people are justified. And I think when you look in nature, when you look at the fine-tuning of nature, the laws of nature, the way that they're set up to produce life, when you see the origin of life, the incredibly improbable origin of life, and then the incredibly improbable evolution of life, I think there's a very good reasons to actually believe that there is an agent behind that, and that things are being designed and guided along a particular path to reach us human beings who can then develop a relationship with our Creator.
Makes perfect sense. Dr. Umar, we've been talking about psychological theories around religious belief, most of which suggest that any inherent desire to believe in God or a higher power has resulted from an evolutionary adaptive social advantage. What do you think the barriers are to scientific approaches accepting the possibility that God exists?
Well, there are two different things in there, and I want to tackle them in turn. The first is you talked about can evolution explain religion? And the second is what are the barriers to scientific acceptance of God? So in terms of evolution explaining religion, again, I think this is a very glib argument that is being made. It's not very well thought through. There are different versions of it, but basically the idea is that religious ideas or religious ideals are productive for humans and are therefore selected for and passed on amongst people. And that's how religion grows. So the idea is that it's naturally selected because it's positive, presumably for reproduction. Even in that, it doesn't really make sense, because let's actually have a look at what religion is. Religion is a set of beliefs, and it's a set of practices. So the beliefs typically are characterized by a belief in a transcendent, omnipotent being, which is completely immaterial, which has created you, many eons ago, and which you're going to end up with, and belief in the afterlife and these things. These things are actually found across religions, across time and space. Societies that were completely isolated from each other have developed a stark similarity in these ideas of some kind of transcendental being that is controlling us or has some kind of control over us, and we have to act in a certain way. And the actions tend to be things like self-sacrifice, self-restraint. Not many religions tell you to go and freely pass your genes on to everyone that you see. Most of them actually tell you to have some kind of restraint, to actually be very, controlled about things. So in terms of the actions and the beliefs, can that be explained by random mutation? I don't really see how. I mean, random mutation can't produce thoughts and ideas. We don't even have a theory of how biology produces consciousness. So we're not going to have a theory of how random mutation somehow across the entire globe, across history, produces belief in a transcendental being, which is completely unlike anything you've ever seen in the world around you. It's not like you've just extrapolated up from a big guy. God is something that's completely qualitatively different to everything in the world by definition. So I don't think evolution can explain that, because it can't produce those. And as for the selection aspect of it, again, I think it's an argument that isn't particularly strong, because, as I said, it's not something which immediately you think about would be passing on genes just so. You need to actually explain things a little bit more rigorously than that. And even if it were true, so even if you could say, okay, well, religious societies are selected for because they become more productive, because they have some advantages over non-religious societies, which I think may well be true, there's an equally plausible religious explanation for that, which is that humans are supposed to be religious. And human societies do better when they're religious because God wants us to be religious, right? So it could be that the God who created us has also given us religion so that we can thrive. And in fact, that is the religious argument. So I don't think it's a good argument in favor of blind evolution. And I think, if anything, that argument, were it to be made, would favor the theistic, the religious perspective much better. But it's not something I would immediately go to when I'm talking about the existence of God. I'm just pointing out that I think it's a very poor argument to be used by non-believers. As for the second part of your question was what are the barriers to scientific people accepting God? I think that's a very big, very complex question. The basic assumption of a lot of modern science is that there is no agency behind the world, and that everything is just due to matter, energy, and the laws of nature. Of course, that's a very incomplete way of looking at things. We are agents, and we know that we can affect and influence the direction of matter. We can change the way around us. I can pick up a glass and put it down. So we know that that's not true. And also we have, serious questions about where did matter and energy come from, and who is the lawgiver behind the laws of nature, and who is the law enforcer of the laws of nature. And actually, I think all of these things ultimately point you back to God, essentially, to a theistic God. So I think there are lots of reasons to why religious people, some scientific people, don't believe in God, but actually there are plenty of scientific people who do believe in God. And the founders of modern science were religious, people like Newton and Kepler, etc. And it's a very recent phenomenon to become more atheistic, which is down to certain religious and social factors. So I think there's a lot in that question, which would probably take a whole program in itself.
Right.
But I think the basic assumptions of modern science are biased against the existence of God, which is why people don't like talking about it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Just lastly, there's a study in regards to this field which identified that children around 4 to 5 years of age automatically accept the concept of God. What is it about the development of children at this young age that causes this to manifest?
Well, I mean, we don't know exactly, but I suspect it's a similar idea that basically they understand that there has to be an agent, some person behind things that are sufficiently complex or things that are sufficiently meaningful. And, when they look around, there seems to be a very natural explanation that the world around them has to come from somewhere, in the same way that everything else kind of came from some kind of designer. There must be some kind of greater designer of the world around us. And in that, I think they're accurate. I think a lot of children grow up and then, get somewhat propagandized with atheism and lose and are taught to distrust their natural intuitions. Richard Dawkins famously said that, biology is the study of living organisms which appear to be designed, but which actually aren't. So he admits that things appear to be designed, but has to add, well, obviously they're not. And I think the first half of it is correct. I think they appear to be designed because they are designed, and you have to unlearn that intuition via Darwinism to actually accept that things aren't designed, even though they profoundly look designed. And as to whether Darwinian evolution is empirically well supported, I don't think it is. And our website, rationalreligion.co.uk, has a lot on this, and our YouTube channel, type in Rational Religion into YouTube, also has a lot on this. We believe that evolution happened, but it was guided by a higher power and intelligent designer. And that's how things happen, rather than through blind mutation and natural selection.
Thank you so much. Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.